Thanks, and firstly, thank you, Johanna, for joining on very short notice because Lucille from 8 Roads couldn't make the panel. So yeah, thanks to you, and thank you, Bobby and Christoph, for being here. So tomorrow morning, I'll be giving a presentation on the state of travel startups, and I wanted to start our conversation by asking some questions about what I'm seeing in our data. So spoiler alert for the presentation tomorrow. Our data shows that investments for the full year 2023 are on track to be down a lot. Certainly versus the last 2 years, but even versus, say, the last 8 years or so, you know, kind of being set back almost a decade as far as funding goes. And this may be true in most industries, perhaps except generative AI. But in travel, demand is holding up, you know, really surprisingly well. So are travel investors optimistic, but waiting to see what happens with demand before deploying further capital? Or is the drop primarily related to interest rates and available yield and the risk curve? Or are things simply cyclical and we are due for a pullback? Because from what I hear, investors have a lot of dry powder on hand, ready to deploy. Yeah, anyone can start.
Ladies first.
Oh, no, go, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Good morning. First of all, it's great that we do the Phocuswright now in Barcelona because it's a heavy travel tech ecosystem, which I like. In terms of the macro, we analyzed, let's say, what happened after 2000 and 2008 in terms of funding volume and also in terms of IPOs. And you see a clear pattern, which we exactly follow at the moment as well. So the pattern is that after 2000 and 2008, let's say the funding volume was going down between 40 and 70%, exactly the same as we are in now. And then there was a turning curve, which we saw, I think roughly something like 2 years after the peak of the IPOs. And that's again what we see here. So in our view, we are close to the turning curve. We are already seeing trends like Get Your Guide, Big Massive Round and others. So I think we are, it's not, it sounds strange, but it's not different to other macro crises we have seen. And let's say investors are waiting to see valuations are coming down as, let's say, in the same way as public valuations. So I think it sounds strange, but it's not unnormal. And I have to say travel has, let's say, recovered even faster than other industries due to the fact that the recovery after COVID is quite strong in travel. So all the travel companies are doing good jobs in terms of path to profitability. So it's nothing abnormal. And let's say, for example, us as an example, we have invested into 10 companies this year, since beginning of this year. So not in a travel company so far, but 10 companies, and that shows that we are back in the game in investing. I'm really, let's say, I wouldn't say super optimistic, but I'm positively about that we are coming into a, let's say, more investing heavy season in the second half of the year.
Okay, so it sounds like you think things are a bit just cyclical, kind of a natural way of things. Okay, Bobby?
So the way I see it is for two reasons. First of all, the entrepreneurs need to readjust a bit their valuation, as you said, Chris. Some valuation are way too high. That's the reason why investors are still not taking decision. But the second reason is because most of the investors are not bullish enough, and they should open the gate. As a travel tech fund, I see the industry bouncing back like hell. Demand is huge. So there is no reason not to push investment. I think it's just a question of balance between reality and crazy valuation that we had to live with for the past five years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, valuations are a big factor.
And us, from an advisory point of view, we realized that, especially startups who made their homework during COVID really went into their product, shaping their product, shaping their processes, got out really strong from COVID. So this gives, of course, them a good position in terms of getting funded, even though valuations go down.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, kind of a silver lining. They're well prepared to take advantage of the explosion of demand. Another question about our data. So it shows that Europe generally trails North America and Asia Pacific in terms of the number of, or the amount of dollars raised. But in 2023 so far, Europe is faring better. Travel startups here have raised more money. There have been more funding rounds than in the other regions. So I'm very curious, what might account for this? Is there something specific happening in Europe that is making investors more optimistic than other areas?
Historically, the travel startups have been underfunded in Europe. And if you take the Phocuswright data, you'll see that over the past 15 years, count only for 1% of total funding across all industries. So it's really, we are way, way, way away from what should be the reality for travel. So that's one main reason. Second reason, according to me, Europe has all the assets to be leader in travel tech. It counts for 10% of the GDP travel. It counts for 10% of every employees. So we have everything to create big leaders. And that's probably one of the reasons why Europe needed to have a travel specialized fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, other comments?
I think Europe in terms of travel tech is interesting because for a global acting investor, Europe is complex in terms of currencies, countries, and size of, let's say, the addressable markets. But if you win Europe in terms of market leader, then you are in a really strong position for other continents. And I think this is exactly the path we can be really proud of from a European perspective, that a lot of companies, travel tech companies, made it exactly in that way. Let's say winning Europe in terms of the complexity and then having a defendable position. And in terms of funding, I have to say travel switched from B2C marketplaces approaches to a lot of B2B play, which I find also interesting. And also the B2C players are switching into additional revenue streams which are more recurring. And then you come into something like sum of a part valuation that you have, let's say, the marketplace valuation multiple on the one hand, and you have subscription revenues on the other hand. So I think travel tech companies in Europe should also think about adding B2B related revenue streams, recurring revenue streams into the classical marketplace approaches we have seen. And then it's getting higher valuations and plannable revenues and more interesting from the global investor base, because they love to see the mix of, let's say, transactional, let's say deal by deal related, and then the recurring revenues mix. And that's what I think could be a good message here, that let's say travel tech should be more focusing on B2B as a second core of the business.
Mm-hmm. Any other comment?
Yeah, I would agree on that. I would like to give another point of view, because I consider it pretty important to really keep good companies here in Europe, to support them, to keep the knowledge here in Europe, to support the economy, because we see that, for example, in these countries like Spain, there is as well a lot of local or domestic travel happening. So this gives the companies, the travel tech companies, a good value really to grow their business here, and where we see a lot of opportunities to invest in them, to keep them not moving to the US, but stay here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. So I have one specific question for each of you, and Johanna, kind of a follow-up to that. I saw you run master classes in fundraising at Ennea, so hands-on supporting entrepreneurs, and it's a very important time for entrepreneurs to brush up on their skills in fundraising. So I was wondering if you could give some of the most important takeaways, without giving away too many secrets, of the things that you do teach entrepreneurs about fundraising.
Yes, to give the audience a bit of an idea what is this program about, and we are, I may mention that we were pretty proud to have Christoph as speaker in our previous master class. So it's a 5 weeks program where we coach early stage startups in terms of leveraging their business, going the next step, and hitting and achieving their first institutional round. So why do we do that? We see that there's a pretty important investor landscape here, but on the other hand, investors become more and more diligent in choosing their targets, and this is pretty important, and on the one hand pretty healthy, but on the other hand pretty challenging for all the startups to get funded. And there we say, okay, we really need to prepare or won't prepare our startups in terms of getting the fundraising achievements done, and coaching them in all business areas or dedicated to their business, as well in terms of pitching. It's not only about presenting your business, but it's about presenting yourself to the investors, and to do it in the best way. There we say, okay, really focus on your business, focus on what you would like to transfer, really shape your story the best way so it is consistent, to really convince all investors. And there, this is 5 weeks program is dedicated to, yes, we consider it pretty important in these days, because we saw that startups are pretty good in their product, growing their team and so on and so forth, but it's another thing if you would like to approach and convince angels in comparison to VCs, right?
Yeah, it's its own skill set for sure. So yeah, that's great. And Bobby, you launched ROCH Ventures last August, I believe, as a fund dedicated to investing in travel, which is great. There aren't too many of those out there. So feel free to give a little background on the fund, but my question is, why aren't there more funds that are more dedicated to travel?
I mean, for a couple of reasons. First of all, as I said, the travel industry is a very specialized industry. And when you talk to generalist investors, they might not have all the knowledge and the specificity of this industry, which is really very specialized on many aspects. The second reason is that most of the entrepreneurs have always looking to scale in the US. And as Johanna was saying, I'm really pushing for a kind of sovereignty thing, saying that Europe should create, enable, and scale the one shaping the future of the industry. So having a European travel tech fund, for me, it's a kind of sovereign decision. The reason why we create ROCH Venture is because we were very bullish last August, and we are even more bullish now. We have bet on the fact that the industry will bounce back. Now it's a reality. And I like very much this quote that I would like to share with the entrepreneurs here. Prosperity tries the fortunate, adversity the great. During adversity, that's the moment where you create the best opportunity. And the period when we entered this industry, according to me, was during the best moment where the opportunity comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've spent most of my career in travel, so I know it's complicated, but I don't know about as much about other industries. Is travel that much more complicated that it scares investors away so much?
So let me take a concrete example that I faced and realized the past 12 months. Everything related to GDSs. If you explain to someone who is totally out of the industry what a GDS is, how they control the distribution of airlines.
For sure.
And that's one of the things that I want to share here. This is one of the segments that should be disrupted. Really be disrupted. And this kind of specific technology or ways of managing distribution in airlines is really specific to the travel and tourism sector. Obviously, if I was like a genius in cybersecurity or healthcare, I would probably have created a fund in this industry. Mm-hmm. But travel is my passion, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity. So, travel tech.
Yeah, that's great. And Christoph, I'd like to ask you about Get Your Guide following their 194 million Series F raise, because you had participated in their Series E in 2019. So Get Your Guide has raised now around $1 billion, has a reported estimation of about $2 billion, which is pretty extraordinary because that's close to TripAdvisor's market cap. And valuations for most tech companies have been falling. So can you talk a little bit about how that valuation is justified?
Yeah, but first of all, one comment on you, Bobby. I like the dedicated travel tech funds, but on the other hand, I have to say you can learn a lot from industries which are really close. Take the transportation, take the logistics as an industry, moving goods from A to B compared to moving people from A to B. There's a lot of synergy in terms of building density in let's say, city by city, or let's say, how do you get the efficiency up? I'm partially agreeing, but I have to say, maybe it's because we have a different view. We have thesis in our funds, which we are concentrating on, but our thesis is vertical software, and that includes transportation. And I think our travel tech founders can learn a lot from industries which are close, but which are acting different. And that's why maybe it's, for a founder, a good combination of a dedicated travel tech fund plus a more generalistic fund. But I have to say I learn a lot from industries which look different, but let's say from unit economics are really close.
Sure, but I consider transportation as part of the travel and tourism industry.
Yeah.
So it's always the definition you give of the industry, whether you add food and beverage, whether you add mobility, but I see it as part of it.
Okay, that's good. And on the Get Your Guide case, I have to say, so Johannes, Tao, and Niels, so they went through an incredible journey, like I think every founder did in the same way. Revenue from a high, let's say, hundreds a million revenues to zero within 4 weeks, having a full-fledged team, thinking about preparing an IPO, and then COVID happened. For a company at that scale and that size, it's really tricky to get the culture and everything on track. And I think then you see the leadership skills of the team, and I'm explicitly including, beside Johannes and Tao, Niels, the CFO, who also did a great job. And I think what they managed over time after COVID, that they rebuilt the customer base, that they were much better in terms of marketing efficiency, much better in terms of general margin, much better in terms of planning inventory and everything. So they improved, and also in the direct competitive mode, you can see, let's say, how they win against direct competitors. And bringing that all together and having, I think that is also important, having a fantastic, let's say, investor base, which is really supportive, like Temasek, like Kinnevik, like others who are on the long journey. I think then it's good to see if you have the right investor base in a crisis mode. And out of that, the existing investors, let's say, all participated in that round, and we were winning a new interesting investor, let's say, as a lead investor. I think these are all the ingredients. So the founders getting the let's say, the key KPIs in a decent way up, and I'm not only speaking about top-line revenue, I'm talking about path to profitability, unit economics, geo density, and this kind of thing. So I'm quite impressed, but I have to say, compared to other portfolio companies, for example, in our portfolio, Omio or Home2Go, they also managed it in the same way, that with a great leadership team, you can really ramp up even faster after COVID, and that's what everyone did. So I'm quite proud about how the founders manage the crisis, and it's good to have founders which are maybe a bit more experienced in crisis mode. That's why I don't want to talk about multiples out of the Get Your Guide, but I think it's a combination of belief in the leadership team, of getting KPIs right, of having a good investor base who is on the long run. So these are all the ingredients.
It's a great team, great business. Yep. We have to talk about generative AI. So as we discussed, travel startup funding, has slowed greatly, but I'm wondering, will the interest in generative AI perhaps spark or help to spark, a new funding cycle and help funding to recover? Or is it more, it's just going to be woven into existing businesses, and it's, you're looking at those businesses kind of the same?
Yeah, so AI, so there are a few buzzwords out there that are really used in almost any discussion, any interview, wherever. So, of course, AI is one of the key disruptional technology that will really change the way we consume, change the way we, yes, of course, in the connection with travel, how we look and search for journeys, and we always have to look through the lens, of course, of the customer. What would we like to serve the customer with the best experience and with the most intuitive and, of course, fast experience? Because when we look into the next generation, so Generation Z is lazy. They would like to be fed with information the easiest way as possible. And there, of course, AI will be the tool, the state-of-the-art tool that will disrupt the entire landscape, of course, in travel. But it has, of course, everything has a flip side. So in terms of, for example, OTAs, will OTAs be needed then in the future, and how will this change? So, of course, a pretty important question that will be answered.
Other comments?
I have to say, I'm trying to unbundle the Gen AI effect from the core use case. So I think the core use case has to be, let's say, an existing one which works without a Gen AI boost. So I think we would struggle to invest just in a Gen AI case. We love to see LLM enabling use cases or boosted use cases like a chatbot which is using all the inventory and getting the efficiency up, using the content to create something new, but we always unbundle how defendable is the Gen AI component, let's say within the existing use case. And also we have we still have some legal and regulation way to go. So everything what we see today is not sure whether we see it in the same way in 6 months. So the fascination is massive, but I think you have to unbundle, as I said, the use case and find a core which has a need to exist without Gen AI, and then you can package it on. But I would not go for a purely Gen AI use case because that is not easy to defend in terms of own USPs.
Just 20 seconds left, so last question is just one piece of advice for all the entrepreneurs out there about how to navigate the next few years in fundraising.
It will be, sorry, go for it.
Oh, pretty good question, of course. I suppose that all the startups and founders that are here are already pretty smart. Yeah, thinking out of the box, really staying ahead, staying informed, keep your processes, your company really lean, to be flexible and really meet the challenges which always come faster and faster.
Okay. Yeah, we have to wrap it up. Really quick advice?
Yeah, very quick advice. We are entering a new era where free money is over. So it's time to learn how to deal with high interest, inflation. And for my generation, we have never faced that. We don't know what inflation means. And the point is that I think that unfortunately this is becoming the new normal. It's not going to disappear in a couple of years. We were in a unnormal period and we are back to a normal period.
You agree? It'll be kind of prolonged?
Nothing to add. All good.
All good. All right. Positive note to end on. Thank you, Christoph, Johanna, Bobby. Appreciate it.